Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Devil's Den Hockey. Now, there has been a tremendous amount of talk among the Devils fandom, in the Devils community, and I think it's time that we finally address the elephant in the room, the rumors that have been circulating around the Devils community for at least a couple of weeks. And that is the matter of re-signing Luke Hughes to his defensive contract. Now, this seems like it's been going on forever. Absolutely forever. However, there is a bit of an issue when it comes to re-signing Luke to his new contract. The Devils currently, as of right now, only have about $6.9 million to work with in order to re-sign Luke. Now, obviously, that is not enough. You have Kovacevic that's sitting on injured reserve. He's going to be taking up He's going to be taking about $4 million a year when his contract kicks back in. However, Luke's going to need at least $7 to $9 million to play with. Now, here's the thing. There is a solution. And this is where the rumor mill is really churning. Is what to do about Dougie Hamilton. So that's what this video is going to be all about, is what do we do with Dougie Hamilton? What do we do? Do we trade him? Do we send him away? Do we keep him? What do we do? Because right now, Dougie Hamilton is making $9 million a year while basically getting 40 points a year. This is not a good contract for the Devils. It is their highest paying contract on the team outside of, I think, maybe Timo Meier, who's getting, 8.5, 8.75? It's a crazy-ass contract. But right now, Hamilton seems to be the piece, money-wise at least, that the Devils are looking to trade. And there has been rumors circulating about whether or not the Devils move. We know that Fitzgerald has said that his number one priority is re-signing Luke Hughes. The problem is you cannot do that with the Devils' current cap space. You just cannot do it. So you need to make a move to figure out what you're going to do to free up some cap space to give Luke Hughes arguably his well-deserved $7 or $8 million contract, possibly $9. I think, in my opinion, it should be $7.5 to $8.5 million a year, and we go from that. So, to trade or not to trade Hamilton, that is truly the question. So, these are the facts so far that I think are relevant to whether or not we move Hamilton. First of all, he's making $9 million a year. He is a second pair depth piece for the Devils as of right now. He has scored 9 goals, 31 assists in 62 to 68 games played. Sorry, my apologies. 64 games played, and has a plus-minus of 8. You are not paying $9 million just so that a guy can score 40 points a year and not even play a full year. Hamilton is certainly injury prone, and it's making his value start to drop off. Now, Hamilton is entering year 7 of a 9-year contract. So that means he's got year 7, year 8, and year 9 of his contract to play through. So you basically have him for 2 or 3 more years. The question is it worth keeping him around if it possibly means interfering with Luke Hughes' contract? And I feel like the obvious answer, unless you're insane or have been living under a rock, is obviously not. If you ask me who would I rather have, Hamilton or Luke Hughes, especially when Luke Hughes might actually be the key piece to getting Quinn Hughes down in the future. Because if you've got both Hughes brothers, Quinn's going to want to come by. Quinn has already expressed interest in playing with his brothers. So there's always that. So, as of right now, Dougie Hamilton is only getting 40 points a season. He's not even playing a full season with the Devils. So it doesn't make much sense, given that he's being paid $9 million a year, for him to stick around when he's sort of interfering with the ability of Fitzgerald to give Hughes his proper and forthright contract. So, as of right now, this is what the depth chart basically looks like. Your first pairing is essentially Luke Hughes and Brendan Pesce. Your second line right now is Jonas Siegenthaler and Dougie Hamilton, which leaves your third pairing of Brendan Dillon and Simon Nemec, right? So, overall, that's good. You pluck Hamilton out of that second pairing, you have a hole. However, we can't forget the amount of depth that the Devils have at the defensive position. You've got Kovacevic, who's going to be coming off of injured reserve, hopefully at the beginning of the year. Right? We're hoping he fills in. So you can literally just swap Kovacevic and Hamilton, toss Hamilton out, and put Kovacevic in where Hamilton's spot is. You're also hoping that Nemec starts to have those breakthrough years. Right? You want Nemec to have anywhere between 40 to 55, maybe 60 if he really pushes it, points per year. I feel like that's a really easy gap. Hell, even between Kovacevic and Nemec, between the two, they can easily get 20 points each, therefore filling in where Hamilton ends up leaving off. It's not that big of a deal. Hell, asking Nemec to contribute 30 to 40 points of his own, I feel like is not that big of an ask. We also can't forget that you also have guys like Seamus Casey waiting in the wings, right? Now, Seamus Casey has already played about 20 to 30 games in the NHL, and so far, he's looked really good. Now, obviously, we don't want to take 20 to 30 games and act like this is going to be a good projection for how the rest of his career is going to work out. Obviously, that's not the case. But hell, even if you fill Kovacevic in the hole, keep Casey in the wings, and have Nemec, or hell, you could even do this whole thing where you could swap out Kovacevic and Nemec from second to third pairing on the defense constantly and see how that works out. Hell, if Pesce or Dylan don't end up working out, especially more so Dylan, because he's more so just a body at the blue line to hit and to run guys through, you could possibly have a pairing of Casey Nemec, or Casey Kovacevic, or Nemec Kovacevic, or Nemec Siegenthaler. There's so much variety that you can do with the Devils' defense. And obviously, years from now, you're also going to have Silayev, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. Silayev, I think it is. Now, obviously, this is not going to be a guy that we're going to need to concern ourselves with at least another 3 or 4 years, at least. Okay. This is a big-ass bodied guy that could potentially replace Dylan on that bottom pairing. So there's a lot you can do with fixing up the defense if you end up losing Hamilton. So it's not so much that we're worried about no one's going to be able to fill in for him. I feel like there's more of an issue if you got rid of Palat, and now you have a hole potentially in your left wing, first or second line that feels like a fever dream or a pipe dream to be able to get a bona fide first or second line left winger. So Palat, I feel like, just isn't the answer to get rid of. Hamilton, you have much more bumper room to play with if you were to end up getting rid of him. Not only that, even if you ended up trading out Kovacevic for Hamilton, you're replacing a guy who's making 9 million big ones for a guy making 4 million little ones. You're taking two guys that basically have the ability to essentially give the same sort of production for the Devils, but one is making less than half of the other guy. And again, let's say Kovacevic doesn't pan out, you have Nemec, you have Casey waiting in the wings, you have the depth down the pipeline for the Devils to not be too concerned about their future, at least with defense. Maybe offense is a different story, but right now, for this video, we're only focusing on the defense. So we're going to take the forwards, and we're going to stick them over here, but we're only going to talk about the defense for now. The other thing that you have to think about is, let's say you decide, yes, we're going to get rid of Hamilton. Who do you give him to? Well, according to the rumor mills that have been spinning all over the NHL as the Devils try to find a good spot for Hamilton, there is one suitor that seems to be standing out more than the others. And we'll see what happens in the next couple of months. We'll see what ends up happening if Hamilton does end up getting moved. But the big thing, the big team that looks like is having some interest towards Hamilton is the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now remember, Dougie Hamilton has a full no-move clause, meaning he cannot be traded, waived, moved down, which you're not going to, it's Dougie Hamilton, you're not putting him in the minors, but waived or moved, you can't do it without Dougie Hamilton's approval. That's part of his contract. He's a full no-move clause, which, you know what, kind of does work in our favor. Dougie Hamilton is a kind of guy, he's a good guy, he's a nice guy, he's contributed to the organization. He came here when really nobody wanted to come to the Devils, right? You had draft picks that were sort of forced to come when they got drafted, like Hughes and Heischer and Luke and Mercer, right? But Dougie Hamilton was the first really big free agent signing that decided, hey, you know what? I'm going to take a chance on the Devils. And you know what? For what he's done, caps off to you, my guy. Thank you for taking a chance on the Devils. And it sort of started to reopen the possibility of, maybe other free agents want to come to New Jersey now that we're starting to build something here. And Dougie Hamilton was one of the first guys to do that. So I think it's fair that Fitzgerald tries to do right by Dougie Hamilton. Now, something that a lot of people maybe don't know about Hamilton, maybe you do, maybe you don't, but maybe you'll learn something here. Dougie Hamilton was born in Toronto. And moving him to the Toronto Maple Leafs, who have generated some interest in Dougie Hamilton, might be the right way to go. Hamilton wants to go to a team that is a contender, that's going to be looking to the future, that's going to be looking to win in the next 2 to 3 years. And the Toronto Maple Leafs, I understand they just got rid of Mitch Marner. However, the Toronto Maple Leafs have been gunning for deep playoff runs for years at this point, especially in the last 3, 4, 5 years or so. All right? Now, getting rid of Marner is a little bit of a gamble. However, Hamilton might be interested in taking a John Tavares-style contract. He is a Toronto boy. As someone personally who lives in Canada, who lives in the greater Toronto area and the cities around Toronto, I'll tell you right now that a lot of kids who play, ball hockey on the streets or in their complexes or play hockey on the ice rinks and they're playing shinny or they're signing up for leagues, they all want to be a part of Toronto. They want to play for their hometown team. And we've already seen that it's totally possible for guys like John Tavares, who are Toronto boys, to take team-friendly contracts, to take a hit in pay to play with their hometown team. And that might be something that Hamilton might be interested in doing with the Leafs. Maybe he ends up having a conversation with Tavares. And to be clear, I'm completely fantasizing at this point, okay? I don't know if this ends up being a practical fix, but if Tavares ends up having a conversation with Hamilton, hey, come over to the Leafs, be a part of the org, be a part of the team that you grew up as a boy cheering for, that you get to possibly end your career with the Toronto Maple Leafs, that might be something that is alluring to Hamilton, that he ends up going to Toronto, that we put him on a team that's actually going to be able to contend year after year after year after year. That's a possibility. That might end up coming about. Now, there is one big issue with this, and that right now is that the Toronto Maple Leafs only have about $5.3 to $5.8 million in cap space to play with. That is not ideal. It's just not ideal, okay? You can't bring on a guy that's going to make $9 million a year and fit him into a team where you just don't have the room for him. So what's probably going to end up happening is the Devils are probably going to have to retain at least $2 to $3 million of Hamilton's contract. Maybe they end up working something out where they don't have to, but as of right now, that's where I feel like it stands. The Leafs are also looking to make changes to their lower levels of their team. And when I say lower levels, I mean their third and their fourth line, right? These are pieces that the Devils are also looking to bolster for the coming year. Now, we signed Dadonov, we signed Brown, we re-signed Glass. Those are good moves. But there's a guy on the Leafs that I think potentially has the potential, I'll be redundant, to help the Leafs. And that's a guy named David Kampf. David Kampf has played with the Leafs for a couple of years now. He's used to their system. He's used to the way they play. And they do play in similar ways, Toronto and New Jersey. They play with similar things. They're a strong, offensively led team that has speed, that likes to dart towards the net, and he's used to filling in that kind of role. So David Kampf might be a guy that the Devils might be looking at to go, okay, we'll make a trade. We'll take Kampf and you take Hamilton. Now, obviously, that's not necessarily a fair trade. Kampf for Hamilton is not fair. The Devils are getting gypped here. Now, the Leafs are going to have to take on more cap space, but the Devils are not going to get something valuable out of that. So here's what I propose. There's another guy on the Leafs that's making a bit of a tussle in the Leafs. He no longer wants to be there. And his name is Nick Robertson. I think that Robertson could potentially be a good fit for the Devils. Not only that, he's the brother of Jason Robertson, who plays out in Dallas. Now, potentially, with the cap moving up in the next year or two, and especially in the next 2 to 3 years, where the cap's going to move up like $23 to $30 million of open cap space to play with, there's a potential that if the Dallas Stars do not continue to contend, do not continue to have success, do not continue to fall just short of the Stanley Cup, that they might be willing to part with pieces like David Robertson. And like the Quinn Hughes situation, where he wants to come and play with his brothers, Luke and Jack, there might be a little bit of bait that you can play with, where Nick Robertson having him there might want to lure Jason Robertson away from the Stars and come play with the Devils. Now, you're going to need to pay Nick Robertson handsomely because he is definitely worth the piece, but that little bit of bolstering your third and your fourth line to maybe bring over that desired extra piece when you eventually get rid of Palat, to fill in that top first and second line position with that additional scoring, might be what the Devils are looking for. Now, this requires a little bit of vision. This requires 2 or 3 years of hoping and praying that all the chips land where they need to be. Now, that's a little bit of it's a little bit of a fantasy. It's a little bit of a utopia. But I'm just trying to paint a picture. I'm just trying to paint a narrative that maybe opens up the Devil. Because could you imagine if your team was Jason Robertson, Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, Nico Hischier, Luke Hughes, Quinn Hughes, Jacob Markstrom? Like, this team is a proper contender. This is a team that will never need to worry about offense or defense or goaltending ever again for at least 3 years. That team is a powerhouse. You combine Jason Robertson with Jack Hughes or Jason Robertson and Nico freaking Hischier, your first 2 lines are set. You're good to go. Nason looks like a piece that could be moved to bring somebody else in. Like, at that point, that's an unbelievable team, right? That's all I'm saying. I feel like Dougie Hamilton is the fulcrum that the seesaw sort of sits on, that sort of determines what the Devils are going to look like in the next 2 to 3 years. And I feel like setting up Hamilton with the Leafs ends up working out for both teams. The Leafs have a little bit more cap space. They signed Tavares to half what he's worth. They got rid of Mitch Marner. He's no longer in the book. That opened up $15 million in cap space for them. Now, granted, they re-signed Knies and they re-signed the rest of them, but holy shit, I feel like Hamilton has the potential to be the guy, the trade, that ends up pushing the Devils one way or another. Now, saying all of this, let me know what you guys think about Hamilton's contract, whether we should trade him, what you think the appropriate price should be if we do end up trading Hamilton. Let me know in the comments, guys, and I will see you in the next one.